Welcome back to Morning Live. Let's now take a final look at your sport news for today. Now, with the Springboks having won back-to-back World Cups, one would assume that a lot of coaches will look at how the Springboks have been playing the game of rugby and bringing a lot of elements to their styles of play. And to help us talk about this, we've roped in Bulls skills coach Phiwe Nomlomo. Okay, Phiwe, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Let's just start and talk about how South African rugby has been criticized by many because they say that our style of rugby is a bit boring, it's a bit obvious. What do you make of those comments? Because we look at it, I mean, so many years down the line, we've got 4 World Cups, we did the back-to-back. What do you make of those comments that say our rugby style is just boring?
Yeah, look, everyone is entitled to their own opinions, I guess, and that's why you get people who are fans, and they must comment on it and what they see and what they'd like to see. When you go a bit deeper, there's people that do a lot of research into why we play the way we do, and that's why we've got a coaching staff and analysis of the nature that we have, and that's why we keep on winning the World Cups, is because of the way we play.
Exactly, and because many times when you look at sports, people will just say they all count. Whether it's a goal, whether it's a penalty, at the end of the day, what you want are the results, and we do have the results. So what is it that you would say we are doing right as South Africa in comparison to other nations?
Look, I think we've got a settled group in terms of selection now. So those guys have been together for over 4 years. Even when there's changes being made, there's 1 or 2 guys that have been brought in, and it's not an overhaul. And the guys are incredible. That coaching staff is really good in terms of future planning and looking forward to what we need in terms of how we're going to play. As you can see, we sometimes go 7-1. Our forwards are second to none in the world. And the starting pack, the guys on the bench, and those that don't even make the 23. So there's a lot of planning behind it. I'll give you an interesting stat, for instance. The final. So every time New Zealand and South Africa have played, the team that scores the first try, 90% of the time wins the game.
Yes.
In the final, it was New Zealand who scored the first try, and South Africa still went and won. So when you look at it and you don't know stats like that, then you want guys to play a bit more expensive and play a different way.
Let's go a little bit deeper into that 7-1 that you speak about, because we saw South Africa utilizing it twice in this World Cup, and a lot of people criticizing once again. Are you seeing us moving more into that style of play, not just for South Africa, but other countries as well, because they've seen how effective it's been for the South African side?
I think that rule will change. I honestly think so. And again, we can do that because of the forwards that we have in South Africa. It makes all sense in the world, and when you look at our back line, we don't often change the backs and we don't get injured. So again, you're not going to do it against everyone that you play. It's well timed. You look at who you're playing against, you look at what you need for that specific game, and then you'll make the selection that you feel is the best for that particular game.
Something else I want to talk about, Phiwe, is the kicking style of play and the kicking game. Because since 2009, I think we've seen the All Blacks utilizing the kicks more to their advantage. France also adopting that style of play. For our ordinary viewer at home who just only picked up rugby during this World Cup, let's talk to how the likes of an Aaron Smith or an Antoine Dupont use that kicking game to their advantage, and how much of a difference that can actually make with a kick out of hand.
Yeah, interesting you want to talk about the kicking game, because a lot of people feel South Africa kicks a lot. France kick more than South Africa. Ireland kick more than South Africa. England kick more than South Africa. New Zealand kick just as much. And yet, people feel that South Africa kick a lot. We scrutinize everything about our country, and sometimes we don't celebrate the good stuff. And we look at Anton, again, he's a special player, just like Aaron Smith, as you've already said. They incredibly accurate in what they do. Especially France, they will go long instead of the contestable game, when New Zealand had favoured the contestable game, which is similar to what South Africa do. So that's where you see the game going, why they're contestable instead of kicking long, and we can go into that a lot deeper.
We won't go into that a lot deeper right now, but something that I do want to touch on is the Manie Libbok aspect, which we saw in the World Cup, and the type of creative play that he brings into the game. Yes, his kicking may not have been where we wanted it to be for this particular World Cup, but what do you make of that creative element that Manie Libbok brings into the game, and what would you say it is that gives him the edge over some other fly halves that we've seen?
Manie's phenomenal. He's a student of the game from when he was a bit young, and he's worked incredibly hard to be where he is now in terms of the skill set. I'm trying not to be unfair to a lot of people, but I don't know anyone who studies the game more than what Mani would do. He leaves no stones unturned, and he works incredibly hard at his own game. So when you look at that and you see him do what he does on the field, it's justified because of how hard he works off the field.
I want to touch on something else before we run out of time. The fact that, of course, we've seen the announcement come through in terms of who the new box coach is going to be. We're losing Jacques Ninaba, very defensive man, the best in the world when it comes to defense. What is it about having such a good defensive coach and defensive structure that allows you to win games? And how do you see us moving forward now as a South African team without having that Ninaba effect?
Yeah, certainty, trust are two things that come straight into mind. Because when you're defending, you don't want to be uncertain about anything. You want to go in, you've got a simple plan that you can always just go and apply. So that's what Jacques brings. He brings a lot of confidence to the side because the guys trust one another. They trust the decisions that they're going to make, and there's certainty in what he wants. And it's that simple. So he doesn't complicate it.
Yeah.
As long as guys are getting off the line, he's quite happy with that. And he's a massive loss. Not just to South Africa, because of how long him and Rassie have worked together, obviously with Sticky, Dion now, Felix is also leaving. So those guys have worked incredibly hard together. There's cohesion. I spoke about cohesion with the team. There's cohesion in the coaching staff. So he'll be massive. He'll be massive, massive loss for us and a massive gain for Leinster.
Indeed, and we think he may just come back to South Africa though at some point or another.
I hope so.
Now, we look at what you do specifically. What would you like to see change in terms of how we approach rugby in this country, in terms of just our skills structures? Because it's not just the Springboks we look at eventually. We've got to look at every single point before we get to the senior national team.
Yeah, I think we're gifted in the type of person that you have in South Africa playing the sport. I'd really love to see guys thinking on the field and not so much structure being given to the players. You'll stick to this, you'll do that there. And I'm talking holistically. As you'll see with certain teams at the moment, guys that make decisions on the field, they're able to change it because of what they see. When the picture changes, you're able to think and apply different aspects of the game that you've learned throughout. So that's a one bit. Pick a player that you trust can make the decisions and let him make those decisions.
All right, so improvisation is what you'd like to see a lot of. Phiwe, thank you so much for your time this morning. That is, of course, Phiwe Nomlomo, Bulls skills coach, joining us this morning to talk all things rugby and just speaking to where we see rugby in this country going moving forward. Of course, we know it's going to be a big one in 2027 when we have to go up and defend that title once again. That's how we wrap up your sport news.